He might be the original young gun. Well, thank you for appearing on the Spittoon. The reason that you're here today is to talk specifically about Langpad, but also about your career in wine and what you see the way forward for South African wine. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, you said we should keep it short. There's 7 questions. But I'll try.
That's a hell of a good point.
Yeah, I've been in the industry for 20 odd years, and it's one of those things where you went from literally the underdog in the wine world to most popular country in the wine world right now. And if you look at a place like London, where we literally had no wines. I mean, they sold plonk. And now you get some of the top wines. It took a hell of a long time. It took us 15, 20 years to get there. But I think we're following a path now that's really interesting. Things like, as I said, Colombard. Colombard is the first planted white grape variety in South Africa. But I always say it's the ugly cousin of Cinsault. And Cinsault was already the ugly cousin. And abused grape variety because nobody took this seriously. And now suddenly, I got to a point, I would say, 2-3 years ago, where I really got tired of Chenin Blanc, Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay. Yes, we've been around the block. So my dream is in 10 years' time, Colombard would be something like Chenin Blanc. There would be a huge amount of them, and people would make them, but terroir driven. This one completely different because it comes from the West Coast, which is first.
I'm going to have to stop you there for a second. Guys, we're out of time. That was Naudé, and thank you for joining us. We're not really out of time. But I did want to interrupt and say the West Coast is something that we do want to talk about. And I think, as you just pointed out, this is a wine from Vredendal. What is it about the West Coast that excites you?
Terroir. Because we were used to Stellenbosch, that's very classical. Then you went to Hemel en Aarde, which has got a very distinct terroir as well. Then Swartland came and almost broke the whole mold of all these things with Swartland style of making. And I think the West Coast is now the first time where all these molds are broken, because in your mind you had the perception of West Coast is mass production and cheap wine. Yes, because that's the way people did that. But if you look at a vineyard like this, why can't it be a top-end one? And I think there's a lot of those vineyards there.
I mentioned earlier that you're always a couple steps ahead of the curve, right? You always seem to be cooking up something that no one else has thought of because it's you think it's a good idea. And then we look back a few years later and you've sort of been at the head of, whether it's the Cinsault revolution or Colombard now, or whatever it might be, you're just sort of often one step ahead. What is next? Is it young vine Assyrtiko? Is it old vine Palomino? Is it like medium-aged olive wine? Like what's going to be, what do you got cooking up in that?
I don't know.
What are you cooking up right now?
I wish I could tell you, and I honestly can't. These things come over my path. I don't look for them. And the thing what I like as well is I get bored quite easily, and I've been doing this for years. Is there something interesting? And then I find these things, and I think, okay, nobody else wants to do it. Maybe I should do it. Is it a clever idea? Maybe not. Is it exciting? Yes. Okay.
Well, Ian, at this point, as a thank you for appearing on the show, I would like you to present me with a gift.
Oh.
Yeah. It has to be a wine from a South African winemaker.
Sorry, just stop. I thought I was the guest.
Yeah, that's not how this works.
Oh, okay. I misread it.
No.
I'm going to bring you a wine from the West Coast because I think, to be honest, that would be the right thing to do to show. It's not just the Colombard. There's some really interesting stuff happening there. And the guy's called Sakkie Mouton.
Yeah.
Mouton, not Mouton, but Mouton.
Sakkie of Revenge of the Crayfish fame.
That guy.
Yeah.
And he's done 2 or 3 wines now. And I think what's exciting and refreshing is these guys don't have boundaries. And they're not there for the glamour and the glitz and all those things. They represent the area, their terroir. And I think they're going to be the pioneers of that new area. And I always feel if you're honest about that, then we can support you as the older group, because that's the way forward for South Africa. So I'm going to show you the wine that Sakkie has brought, and it's not this one.
Yes.
This is his 2nd or 3rd wine that he released, the Vermentino from that area.
Yeah.
And how exciting is that for South Africa? Because, I mean, we sit with cultivars that we didn't know we have.
Yeah.
From areas we knew we had, but we didn't know what quality it has.
Yeah.
And I love the label because you would see on the label, there's an old man sitting on a cow.
Yeah.
And that's his grandfather. So it shows you these guys are cowboys.
And thank you very much for this wonderful gift. I just wish that Sakkie was here himself to talk about this wine. Ian, thank you very much for being here today. And it's been a pleasure. And we've really enjoyed it. Thanks for showing us this wine by Sakkie Mouton.
Ik vat nog my eie wyn. Nou genoeg.
That's our Spittoon over there, by the way.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, and I'd love to know more about Sant Erf Vermentino.
Well, yeah, let's start first with the reason that I wanted to do Vermentino. So this block was planted for one of the bulk wineries for Lutzville in the West Coast. And it's actually planted on the same spot as the Revenge of the Crayfish Chenin. And when I worked with it, and I tasted their wine 2 years ago that they made with it, and it reminded me a lot of the crayfish. There was a lot of that same minerality and that kelpiness. And as soon as I tasted that, I just knew I have to make a wine from this. And yeah, as soon as I tried, this year when I made it, I was surprised. It's got that same salinity, same acidity, and the fruit intensity is super good. So I'm very pleased with it. And yeah, I just had to put my grandfather on the label because that just shows my heritage to the West Coast and where I grew up and kind of just how whack it was. And I mean, I bet if you go there on a Saturday, you're still going to find someone riding around on an ox.
They didn't even bat an eye.
Somewhere in the West Coast. So yeah, and it's a wine that I'm hoping Vermentino really grows bigger in the West Coast because I think it perfectly sums up the terroir.
When we talk about the West Coast and terroir, why is it something that you're excited about, and what is it that you're trying to show with your wines?
So we've got 5 main regions in the West Coast. So it's a lot like the Swartland with the Kasteelberg and the different regions in the Swartland. It's got that same kind of vibe, except we don't have mountains. For us, the only thing that kind of determines the way the terroir shows is the distance from the ocean. So we get that oceanic influence about 50 kilometers inland. So when you start in Traval, which is the most southern point of the West Coast, it's super hot and the temperatures are a lot the same as Wellington. As you move to Klaver, you kind of get a lot of Parel. Then you move towards Lutzville and Vredendal, where you're going to get Vredendal is a bit hotter. So that's going to be Paul as well, close to that, the temperatures. And then as you go to Lutzville, I don't want to say this, but it's the same minimum and maximum temperatures as Stellenbosch. And then Koekenaap is Constantia. They found that it's got a lot of the same temperature as Constantia. So the only difference is our daylight, like the intensity is way more obviously than it is here. We've got winds, heavy winds, and it's about 40 meters above sea level. So you're not very high up. And yeah, it's very flat. So it's super hot. On a hot day, it's very hot, but that oceanic breeze is pretty much what makes it interesting.
You say Koekenaap is like Constantia. Are there a lot of Land Rovers in Koekenaap as well?
No, I think there's only one guy. He gets a lot of trouble
flack,
for it. Yeah.
Toyotas all
He's
the way.
the oil stealer of the town.
Listen, Ian mentioned earlier, and I thought it was interesting, the young guys who don't really play by the rules. Is that something that you consider yourself as? Like, do you think of yourself as a bit of a rebel? Like, do you care about structure, old rules? Are you sort of fighting against that?
I think when you're young and I'm still very young, but I've been doing this for 3 years now, and I think at the start, you're all about you want to fight something, or you've got that kind of spirit in you. And then you realize that there are certain rules that you still need to follow, and you can't just go out and do what you want. That is not how it works. And you need to stick to certain rules. That is, I want my wines to be in balance. I don't want to make something that's completely weird. I always say the West Coast as a terroir is weird. Why do I want to go and make that weird? It's already weird. I just have to capture that weirdness.
Sakkie, one of the things that I requested for you as sort of a thank you to appearing on this magnificent show was to bring me a gift.
Okay, well, I brought you a wine. And this is a wine it's one of my favorite producers from, let's say, the young gun generation. Scions of Chenin, so Bernard Bredel. Well, specifically, he's also, what I love about him, he's into capturing a certain place. And he's not trying to make it weird. He's just trying to capture the weirdness of that place. And I think that is very genuine. And he's just an all-around great guy as well. I don't have to look anywhere else if I want to taste the Helderberg.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sakkie.
Yeah.
I might add at this time that when we spoke to Chris Arlott, Butch, I asked the same thing from him.
I love this producer. I think he's a very smart guy. It's Bernard Bredel, Scions of Sinai. And this is a Syrah from the False Bay Coast.
He's also a big fan of Bernard Bredel's work.
Yeah.
And so I think what we've learned here today, a few things. One, look out for Bernard's wines. They're amazing. Two,
Definitely.
Look out for Sakkie's wines. They too are amazing. They're incredibly idiosyncratic. They are, as he says, weird. They represent the West Coast, and they are really a thing of beauty. And thirdly, look out for Ian Naudé's wines. I think he's sulking in the back somewhere for some reason. I'm not sure why. He stormed off set earlier on. Sakkie, I've had a really lovely time talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us. And
Thank you.
all the
Thank you
best.
for having me here.
Shouldn't you have them in?